So I was in the shower, I was cleaning my ass and making all sure it's all sparkly, spanking clean.
I'm not the funny one. I'm the pretty one.
Cock shots. I just checked myself out.
Candles, music, wine, and then lube up and get on top.
The glory hole's like a dick theater. I've imagined your family.
Which means your pants had better come off. Mama needs playtime. I think
We're not sluts.
we just love love.
Hello, 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 hello.
Hello.
How's everybody doing out there today?
Yeah. Welcome back to another By the By.
Yes. Sorry, I'm still playing with the mixing board.
Uh-huh.
And
Still playing with your buttons?
it's pushing my buttons. Yes.
Yeah.
I feel like I need my buttons just in case I need somebody to laugh at me.
I'm sure we can get that for you, babe.
So here we are on another week of By the By. What do we have going on? What do we want to talk about before we talk about what we talk about?
It is Pride Month. We're getting towards the end.
It is.
Yeah.
It is, but that's what we're going to talk about. Do we have any updates or anything? So if you are still interested in supporting our movie that we are making, it is queer friendly. It is poly friendly. It is not friendly to the ratings board. So yes, you can still donate. That's a tax deductible donation. If you're in Australia, you can still get it in your tax deduction this year. So for those in the States, the Australian tax year goes from July to June. It's weird as hell. It does not follow the calendar year, whatevs. Anyway.
But it also makes it a lot less stressful, like at Christmas time.
That's fair enough. Yeah. You're not stressing at the end of the year to get everything in.
Yeah. So that's good. So if you want to make a donation to that, it is at www.australianculturalfund.org.
Yes.
And just search for Refused Classification.
Yes. So that's the name of the movie, is Refused Classification. And like we said, it's something we're pretty excited about. And it's going to be...
It's going to be fun. I look forward to it.
We're going to make this movie, and it's going to be released this year.
Yep, and it'll be a short film. So nothing super long, but it's exciting and it's going to be fun. And I can't wait to see it.
And it is a comedy, so I think that's important to say because this can be serious subjects. So pretty excited for that. Do we have anything else? We have nothing. We're still just now starting to get out of quarantine. Unfortunately, our secret spot is yet to open. We're hoping that beginning of August. So August 1st is the date that we're fingers crossing it on.
Yeah, and we are, even though it is the end of June, we're already making some plans for dates late in July. So nothing too soon, but we're starting to think about getting out and starting the kind of one-on-one dating again. And I'm really looking forward to that and just connecting with people, even if it's just, admittedly, we'll probably have sexy times, but even if it is just kind of hanging around and chatting and just being free and, kind of getting rid of some of the heavy stuff. Yeah,
because it's interesting because we still, when we go out and you see a big crowd, it is a bit of a second guessing thing. You look at them and you're like, are you infected? And we're nowhere near the problems that the poor U.S. is having. So I can't imagine what it's like going out there.
I don't think we would.
No, I don't think we would. We would be some of those that are at home quarantining and
still isolating.
Not one of the ostriches that like to stick their heads in the sand. Go vote, people.
Yep.
That's going to become a theme of this podcast, I think. This episode, I should say. Yeah, so as Angela touched on a couple of moments ago, this is the last week of Pride Month, though I don't feel like it should be just a month. You can be full of pride year round. But officially June is Pride Month for the LGBTQ plus community. And that's sort of one of the things we wanted to talk about today. So, we often are out and we get to fly our freak flags and we march in Mardi Gras. There's been news articles on us. We've got the podcast. So we definitely are, out there and hopefully we show pride and demonstrate a positive side to both, for both the queer community and the ethically non-monogamous community, the kink community, the poly community, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But I was kind of curious, Angela, on the spot.
Okay.
What does pride mean to you? So, like, what do you think when you think pride, and you think, what is it? How does it make you feel? What is it?
So the first thing that comes to mind for me is being out and loud and proud. And so it is being able to be authentically myself and being able to not hide that and to be that around anybody that I interact with in daily life and just being able to be that. And it's not like necessarily throwing it in people's faces, but I just don't hide who I am. And that's just how it is. But I also understand that for a lot of people, that's not possible, and they aren't able to be exactly who they are around everyone in their life. And in fact, may not even be able to be around anyone in their life. And that's completely okay. I don't think there's anything wrong with that, because we all have our reasons and we all have our life circumstances, and it's different for everyone in who's around and where you are and what's going on. So I think ultimately, yes, it would be amazing if nobody had to hide who they were, if they could just be who they are and be accepted in society at large, in their small circles, in their big circles. That would be the absolute ideal. That's not realistic at the moment, and I don't think, quite frankly, it ever will be realistic. So ultimately, I would say that to me, pride is about accepting yourself for who you are and knowing that you're okay with who you are and okay with whether it be your sexual orientation, whether it be lifestyle choices, whatever it is, that you're okay with this and that you accept yourself and that you're not beating yourself up for it. You're not giving yourself a hard time for who you are and how you feel and how you want to live your life, and that you're able to do that as much as you possibly can, even if it's in your own little private life. And hopefully you've got a loved one or loved ones in your family, your friend circle, your community that you can be authentically yourself with. But even if it is just an online presence, and maybe you have an online support group, I would hope that everyone has at least someone or someone's that they have as a support group. But I think ultimately it's more about just accepting yourself and being honest with yourself, being true to yourself and being comfortable with that. And then, if you can affect other areas, then that's great. But if not, just know that you're who you are and that that's okay.
Well said.
And you?
Yeah. Look, so a few weekends ago, we did a Pride night at the Imperial Hotel here in Sydney.
With Biconic?
With Biconic.
Yes.
Yes. And we were one of the few people who actually were there in person because we got to get up on stage and do a little interview with Bree, who has been on the podcast before. And so one of the questions she asked was, what does pride mean to you? And for me, I think it's sort of dovetailing from what you just said. A lot of people, when they hear pride, they think leading a parade or leading the march and screaming and drawing attention to in a positive way, the community and the lifestyles. But I also think it's just as important to focus on quiet pride, because, like you said, not everybody can be who they are authentically, be it from family or be it from their religion or their work or their government. But quiet pride is just as important. And I think it's one of those things that I think also often gets overlooked. And so it is one of those things that if you are, do something for yourself, even if it's just as simple and small as writing, your label that you like, or something in the mist on the shower door as you shower. It's that making it real, seeing something physical. I think that's what pride is sort of all about, is the positive effect that you can have on yourself and hopefully others, and actually making it manifest.
And sometimes having that little something that is just yours can be kind of exciting and titillating, and knowing that you've got something that is really special to you and it's just yours, even if you can't share it with other people. That can be enough. That can be what you need.
I agree. Yeah. And it's hard, but I think that it's important to remember that pride doesn't have to be screaming and loud.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's I think it's immensely important to sort of recognize that. And we've been very quiet on all of our socials just because life has been very stressful, both, for us work-wise and mental health-wise. And we haven't been swinging our flags around. And then with, everything else that's going on around the world, it seems, we don't want to take away from the importance of the Black Lives Matter movement. So it is very much we were quiet out of respect. Yeah. The queer community fought very hard to get where they are and to get the rights that we all have. And it's, it would be nice to see that we band together with the Black Lives Matter movement.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
Absolutely.
Look, do you want to jump into the meat of our podcast? We were very, very fortunate to get to interview the vice president of Asylum Connect. It was such a good opportunity to talk to somebody who worked with Asylum Connect. So we'll let Hans talk to you more about what they do, but basically it's about helping the LGBTQ plus community seeking asylum in the U.S. mostly, but from places where they're persecuted.
Yeah, so Asylum Connect it's a tech resource platform for people that are fleeing persecution due to sexual orientation or gender identity. So it helps to connect people who are asylum seekers with services and resources, and they have a lot of informational resources on their website. There's a lot of different services they can connect people with, and there's a lot of different ways to support the community and asylum seekers. And it's such a good resource, but like Bradford said, we'll let Hans talk to you a little bit more about it, a little more in depth, and then we'll come back at the end.
Yes, and away we go. So we'd like to welcome Hans from Asylum Connect. This is a great organization that is really helpful for the LGBTQ plus community. Rather than me kind of go through and try to tell the folks at home what you do, why don't Hans, hello, and why don't you tell us exactly what Asylum Connect does and how you help?
Yeah, hi everyone. Thanks for having me today. I'm Hans Hao, Vice President of Asylum Connect. We are a tech nonprofit that helps provide the world's first tech resource platform for those who are fleeing persecution based on their sexual orientation or gender identity. There are more than 70 countries around the world where it is illegal to identify as LGBTQ, and in many cases, it's extremely dangerous for them. And many of those asylum seekers come to a country like the US, Canada, and UK to seek asylum so that they will no longer be persecuted due to their identity.
That's amazing. And so how many individuals are we talking about that are in a position where they are seeking asylum for who they are?
I think there are not really sort of hard numbers in the US because it's hard to find, what percentage of asylum seekers in the US would actually identify as LGBTQ, because asylum seekers can apply for asylum based on persecution because of their political opinion, because of their religion, and many other factors. But I would say in the United States, we have almost 1 million cases that are in the backlog of our immigration courts. And I would say a percentage, probably 10% of that would be related to LGBTQ asylum. And so that's a huge, number of people who come from countries where, it's dangerous for them and they have been persecuted, and they come to US in search of a better life. But unfortunately, the journey of seeking asylum is extremely challenging and long, especially under the current administration.
So what kind of resources does Asylum Connect connect people with? I'm assuming it would be law resources, healthcare, what kinds of...
Filling out the forms.
Yeah. Any kind of resettlement?
Right. Legal representation is definitely one of the main ones. So we do connect asylum seekers who need access to lawyers who can represent them, whether it's in court or at the asylum office. and then access to healthcare resources, especially mental health care, because many asylum seekers have suffered trauma from their past and in a journey to their new country. And they need access to affirming mental health care that can help them process the trauma. And then also access to homeless shelters, food, employment training, language classes, that sort of thing. Because many asylum seekers come to the U.S. don't necessarily have the financial resources to start to get access to those services, and a significant percentage of asylum seekers can end up homeless because when they first arrive in the U.S., there's a long period of time where they are not eligible to work to earn an income. So then, many of them without any income would be ended up homeless. And I think that's a problem that we are trying to solve, and we work with nonprofits who can help to provide those services.
That's fantastic. So how long has Asylum Connect been going as a nonprofit?
I think officially Asylum Connect has been going for 5 years now. It started out as really an idea founded by Katie, who's the current executive director. She and her co-founder, who's a gay asylum seeker at that time, realized that there's this gap that many asylum seekers face, and piloted the product in 1 or 2 cities, and realized that this problem is actually bigger than they envisioned. And I joined the team very early on in 2016, 2017. And we were in a few major cities in the United States, and have since scaled the catalog nationally, and have also expanded to Canada and Mexico in response to what the Trump administration is trying to do to restrict immigration in general in the U.S. And the reason why we are growing is, unfortunately, the need is growing. And I think our mission is to hopefully one day be able to help anyone who is being persecuted based on their sexual orientation or gender identity to really build a new life. And that's a goal that we're trying to reach.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you touched on it a bit there with the Trump administration, and I don't think it's any surprise to anybody who's listening that a lot of what he has done has not been of help for the LGBTQ plus community. Can you talk a bit more on that? I know that it's a struggle, and we see a lot of things that it seems like anything that the Obama administration put into play, the Trump administration tries to retract, basically just because of him just not liking Obama. It doesn't seem to have anything to do with the policies at all, really. Right. It seems personal.
Yeah.
So that's like, I also didn't have a positive to this, which is, what the Supreme Court did in the past 2 weeks, saying that you cannot fire somebody based on their gender identity or their sexual orientation, and then also rolling back, or they're pushing back on the DACA. So I know that's I just dumped I dumped a full podcast on you. No pressure, but just how does Asylum Connect? How are you dealing with that? All that information.
Yeah, and I can go back even last year when the Trump administration introduced the Remain in Mexico policy, which is essentially an immigration ban for migrant asylum seekers from South America who are trying to enter the U.S. through our southern border. And seeking asylum is a legal right that they have. And basically the Trump administration is telling them, well, you have to remain in Mexico until your case is heard. And for many of those asylum seekers who have escaped dangerous conditions, some of whom identify as LGBTQ, it's not safe for them to remain in Mexico while they hear their case. We have been seeing a lot of cases of kidnappings, of gang violence that occur in Mexico, and obviously the Trump administration is forcing them to remain in Mexico, and that's why Asylum Connect, even though we initially started out being just focused in the US, had to expand to Mexico because we received inbound inquiries from asylum seekers in Mexico who are saying, well, I'm here, I don't really know where to go to stay while I'm hearing my case, and I'm gay, and I'm traveling with other migrants and who discriminate against me. Like, what should I do? Which is why we have to partner with Mexico-based nonprofits to connect them with the resources that they need. And that's just one example that I think the Trump administration has been introducing. And I think the most recent rule is his latest draft rule to really redefine the asylum system in the US. And his latest draft rule would essentially increase or maximize the bar of persecution. So for an asylum seeker who might face a threat of imprisonment, that by itself would no longer be considered persecution, which is extremely dangerous because that would disqualify most of the asylum seekers who are already in the US from being successful in their case. And his administration is also trying to remove gender-based violence from being a group that qualifies under asylum. And I think that is especially troubling because you have transgendered asylum seekers from countries where being transgendered by itself would be seen as a crime and they're subjected to so much violence. And that what the Trump administration is saying is that, well, you would no longer be eligible to apply for asylum because of the fact that you receive gender-based violence, and we don't consider that as a category. So I can go on and on, but from all of this, I guess, anti-immigrant and anti-asylum seeker sentiment from the Trump administration has been extremely challenging for so many nonprofits that work directly with asylum seekers. And I foresee coming up with the election this year in November that there'll be many lawsuits filed by nonprofits to really slow down all of this anti-immigrant rules that he's trying to push forward.
It's just amazing how, with all of that, it's almost like trying to dismantle the asylum system completely. And
yeah.
It's hard for me to fathom.
Yeah, it's tough, growing up in the American South, you hear like America is the safe place for people. We welcome people with open arms.
The land of opportunity.
That seems now kind of like just a bullshit thing that we told ourselves.
For sure. And I think this is something that I take personally, just a little bit about my background. I am a gay asylum seeker who grew up in Malaysia, one of the countries where it's legal to be gay, knowing very well that gay men could be imprisoned up to 20 years just for being who you are. And I came to the US by way of education and I applied for asylum 3 years ago. That was 3 years ago. And to this day, I'm still waiting for the day that I will get an interview. And I think that is indicative of what the Trump administration has been doing to so many immigrants who applied for asylum in this country many years ago. And they are stuck in this huge backlog that contains so many cases that the immigration offices and courts are not able to process. And the Trump administration is not doing anything to help process those cases faster while making sure that every case gets the time and attention that it needs, because folks are fearing for their lives. And right now there's a huge backlog, and he's trying to gut the asylum system. And God knows if he's successful, hundreds of thousands of asylum seekers would be deported from this country back to where they came from. And the amount of violence that would create as a result of that would be huge.
And it just does go to show how many resources are needed to support these people during that time, because it's not, like you said, it's not a quick process. It can take many, many years, and that length is as of yet unknown because that backlog isn't really getting pushed through. So that's a lot of resources that are needed in the meantime.
I guess a quick question is, do you have any sense of how many cases are in that log? Like how many people are in line? Do we know?
So in the immigration courts, there are almost 1 million cases in the backlog across the U.S.
And so you've been waiting for 2 years.
3 years.
Almost 3 years.
Sorry, you've been waiting for 3 years.
Yeah.
How long does the average asylum seeker have to wait? Is that normal?
It is normal under this administration. It depends on the office, which jurisdiction your office is located in. For San Francisco, I think the average wait time is 2 years. But for LA, for example, where you are closer to the southern border, the wait time could be 3 years.
Wow.
Same thing with New York, where in major cities where you have many asylum cases being filed, the wait time tends to be longer. But I would say on average 2 to 3 years is pretty common. And I think the Trump administration introduced a last in, first out policy last year, where cases that are filed today would get priority in terms of their interview. So to deter folks who are just coming to the US just to get a work permit from applying in the first place. Because if you apply for asylum today, you would have your interview within months, in 2 to 3 months, and then you know whether your case is successful or not. And I think the repercussion of that is that anyone who applied for asylum before that rule was introduced, so this was back January 2018, get pushed back further into the backlog because every day there are new cases being filed. So there's not going to be a time when the courts or the asylum officers will ever get to the backlog because they are still processing cases that are being filed every single day. So folks like me are stuck in a backlog waiting for years, not having a light at the end of a tunnel.
Wow.
That's depressing.
Yeah.
Yeah. And all this time you have to survive on your own. You know, you have to figure out how you would be able to pay for legal resources if you don't have pro bono legal representation.
So if people want to work with your organization, I'm assuming that you just partner with like law firms, you partner with healthcare facilities, other nonprofits I know you mentioned. So can people reach out to you and say that, hey, we want to work with you? Is that how that works? Or
they could go to our website, asylumconnect.org, to check out our catalog. And if they are a direct service provider who is willing or is providing services of any sort for immigrants in general, they can list themselves as a resource on our catalog. And we would reach out to those organizations and vet them and make sure that they are safe and affirming for asylum seekers and for LGBTQ people before we actually put it on our catalog. Right. So I suggest that they definitely reach out to us.
Okay.
And is this people anywhere? Are we talking US wide or are we talking worldwide?
US wide and Canada and Mexico as well. So those are the 3 countries that we are currently active in, and we could potentially expand to other regions in the future based on need, but at the moment we are focused on those 3 countries.
Right.
Gotcha.
And also, I'm assuming that if people would like to make a tax-deductible donation, that's also acceptable.
It's always welcome, especially during Pride.
Yes.
And details are on our website too.
Excellent.
Yeah. So we're jumping around a bit because it just pops into my head. Would you mind speaking a little more about growing up in a place where being gay and growing up in a place where you're not safe to be gay or be yourself? Do you mind talking about that a bit?
Yeah, it's extremely challenging because when the law says that you could go to jail just for being gay, at a young age, when you're accustomed to that kind of environment, you do whatever you can to stay safe. You try to fit in as much as possible until when you get to a certain age, and if you start to stand out a little bit, then you get targeted. And for me, I've been targeted by gangs, and I was involved in a police incident one time where I was, they would threaten to arrest me just for me being who I am. And I think that kind of incident is pretty common, unfortunately, in Malaysia, especially I think transgender Malaysians have, faced the most violence because they obviously can't hide, the external appearance, and police violence is very real, and it's condoned by the government because the law says that it's a crime. And for me, even when I try to speak out against that, I wrote an article a few years ago that went viral in the Malaysian media because I was basically just criticizing what is happening and calling for those laws to be abolished. I received so much hate from the public, and I've seen how activists and journalists being penalized by the government just for speaking up and criticizing the government for what they do. And it's totally legal in Malaysia to do that, which is, really unfortunate. And I think because of that, because life is just so difficult for anyone who identifies as LGBTQ in Malaysia, that you either have to remain in a closet or just not bring attention to yourself, because when you do, you are, risking danger, and, many Malaysians have to go to other countries as a result.
Wow. So what is the prison's term for being gay? I mean, because it's not like you can change and be not gay and be let out of prison, right? I mean,
Yeah, the maximum sentence is up to 20 years.
Wow.
So it depends on the situation. It depends on the court. It depends if there are just so many factors behind that. Obviously, the more visible or the more vocal you are, and if you are seen as a threat to the government, obviously the sentence would be very different than if you are just someone who's an average person who's not doing anything beyond just living your daily life.
Right.
So I think it varies, and there's not really a consistent sentencing process. And I think that's the problem, is that the government can create this environment where people are just so fearful and not having the power to speak up because they know the consequences if they do. And that's I think how the government suppresses people's voices and stay in power.
And that prevents change from happening as well by doing that.
Yeah.
Ugh. It's just depressing.
Yeah.
Yeah. And like you said, there's so many other countries out there that are in the same boat.
Yeah.
And it is really sad for people there, for the LGBTQ people living there, that is their daily life. And yeah, where do you go? How do you get away from that? How are you then able to live and be who you are?
Yeah, exactly. And there are about 70 countries where it's legal. That's a big number.
Yeah.
Even though I think we have made some progress in recent years, Taiwan and India have made some progress on that front, but I think we still have a lot of work to do ahead of us.
Yeah. So do you see a light at the end of the tunnel? I'm assuming this is one of those things very much that we tell people, as we often do, vote.
Yes.
And if you're voting for somebody who passes laws that hurts people you love, you are hurting people you love.
Right.
So do you see, is there a light at the end of our tunnel?
I think I do because I think I have to. I do think that especially in the U.S., what we have seen just within the past few weeks has just given me so much hope that there are a lot of people out there that are not willing to just stay quiet when they see injustice and are willing to speak up, even if it's an injustice that doesn't necessarily affect them directly, but it affects people that they know. It affects their friends, their families, people who are different than them, and that they are willing to, protest and bring attention to the issue. And I think that has given me hope. And I think that light of a tunnel that I see is a lot of more people are mobilizing to vote or to get people to understand how important voting is in November. Because, obviously there are many forces that try to suppress people's ability to want to vote in this country, and that we have to push back against that. And I think that also correlates with Pride Month. I think the LGBTQ movement in the US is really based on the power of protest, right? When you have the first person who threw the stone at Stonewall in New York, or when you have protests led by Supervisor Harvey Milk, who was assassinated in San Francisco. And I think change will come, and I think hopefully we'll see that in November.
It's interesting that you mentioned as well the forces that work against people wanting to get out and vote, but there are also forces that work out against people in the ability to vote. And
right.
And I would encourage people that even though it may be difficult, even though it may take more work, like just please try and do whatever you can to get out and vote, because it is important. And not just in the national elections, but at your state and at your local levels as well. Because so many people do focus on the federal election, which, yes, is very important, but the state and local levels have a lot of power as well. And can affect, your little bubble. And I think that that's really important to remind people that don't ignore those. Those are very important as well.
Yeah, I agree. I think especially, city councils, they are responsible for the budget that funds the police departments and trying to figure out how resources get allocated locally. And I think, it's important to bear that in mind.
Yeah, very much so. Yeah. It's interesting. Just this is a very small version of that, but growing up in rural U.S., the city council for where I grew up would not allow pride flags, wouldn't allow pride marches, anything like that. That was off the books. No. And I remember even when I was in college, people would come and say, we want to do just a small gathering of people, and the city council would flatly say no. Yeah. Now, however, they have a pretty big pride. It's a different council because people were voted onto it, and now they do a nice big parade in June, and it's it's a few hundred people, but we're talking a few hundred people in a county that is 40,000 people. That's not bad, really.
Right.
So it's nice to see people going out and voting, and then changing those things once we change it on a cellular level, I think that sort of drifts up, because then even growing up, people say, oh, well, that wasn't that bad. It wasn't as bad as I thought.
Right.
So it's
chipping
away.
And I think even now, especially with COVID, obviously it's understandable that it's even harder for people to go out and mobilize. And whether they want to risk the health or the health of their families to go out and vote. And for, those who don't have the option to have a mail-in ballot, they have to think about, how can I do this safely and still exercise, my right to vote.
Yeah. It does make it a lot more challenging.
Which will be a whole different conversation that we have here soon, which is about mail-in ballots and whatever. It's
going to be a challenge because there are those of us, we're U.S. citizens, and so we have to mail in vote from down here in Australia. But even while people think of mail-in voting as being for those who are overseas and whatnot, there's a lot of people, like you said, locally, who maybe for health reasons or different reasons can't get out and vote physically, or they don't want to put themselves at risk. And so it will be interesting to see how the system handles mail-in voting this year, because I think it's going to be a much, much bigger thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. And COVID disproportionately impacts communities of color
Right.
too. So knowing that, we need more people to go out to vote who would, hopefully vote the current occupant of White House out of office, I think just by the fact that more communities of color are at risk, I think that's a pretty scary voter suppression scenario.
Yeah.
Yeah. For sure.
Excellent. Do you have any more questions?
No.
So we would very much like to thank Hans, Vice President of Asylum Connect, for coming on and chatting with us. So that was, just so I get it right, it's asylumconnect.org. Is that correct?
Yes.
Excellent.
Excellent.
So if anybody wants to volunteer, or if they want to donate, the best way, if you can't volunteer with your law degree, volunteer with your money.
Yes.
That's what we always say.
You don't need a law degree to volunteer with us. You're welcome. Anyone and everyone.
Excellent. Any final thoughts you would like to say, Hans?
No, I think it's Pride Month, and I'm wishing everyone happy Pride. And I think all of us can do our part to make more progress, to make sure that everyone who identifies as LGBTQ can be their authentic selves without fearing for their lives, and hopefully, things will change for the better in the near term.
Yeah.
Go and vote. I think that's the only other thing I would add to that.
Yes.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Happy Pride. And we hopefully we'll see, no offense, less need for your your organization here in the future.
Yes, I hope so. Yeah, thanks for having me.
So just a special thanks to Hans from Asylum Connect for taking time out of his Saturday to speak with us about something that's so important that admittedly I think I knew very, very little. I think it came across in the interview that I knew very little about the need for something like Asylum Connect,
and how widespread the issue is. And we know that policy wise that the current administration is detrimental.
Yes,
we know that, but I don't think I quite realized how many asylum seekers themselves. There are so many people. Yeah. And it's just a massive problem. And it is good that there are at least groups like Asylum Connect out there who are working to help people and to give them the resources and to try and help them get through this.
Yeah. And it's one of those things that, everybody deserves to feel safe, and everybody deserves to feel safe as who they are. And so it's something that's, I think, so important that so many people should be able to get behind and know that it's not what others are taking from you. It's what we can do to help others be as equal and have the privileges and rights that we all have. Again, going back to some stuff that we talked about before.
Yeah.
But it's an amazing. It's an amazing organization, and I think it does something that's very important.
Yeah, and if you'd like to reach out and connect with them, if you'd like to volunteer, help in any way, if you just want to donate, that's absolutely welcome. And their website is www.asylumconnect.org, and we will put a link in the show notes as well for that.
Yes, and like we said in the interview, if you are unwilling to donate, if you're unable to donate, if you're unable to donate your time, you can vote.
Absolutely.
Voting is so important. And I think that so many from our generation just sort of take it for granted. I don't know how many know this in the US, but in Australia, voting is compulsory. You have to vote. You're fined if you don't vote. And I think that, in the US, it seems like, also in Australia, the voting is on the weekend. And it's after living here and looking back at the way the US does it, it seems like people, they don't really want you to vote. They're trying to keep you from voting. And the question you should always ask yourself is, who are they trying to silence? Who are they trying to keep from voting? And this isn't a political podcast, and we're not going to make it a political podcast, but I would encourage people to use common sense and just when you go and vote, remember that it's not necessarily, you're not voting for just yourself. You're voting for all the people that you love. And, something that we often say is that if you vote for someone who passes laws that hurt me, then you're not supporting me.
No, you're doing harm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And also for those who are saying like, I'm not happy with the choices. I'm not happy with the choices. Look, we're never happy with the choices. It's not about that. Think of it as, and this is going to be hard for people in the US because many of them have not done this, getting on the bus and trying to go somewhere. Or hell, think of it about you're either going to Universal Studios or Walt Disney World. You end up at the parking lot. You still have to walk. You're trying to get to the neighborhood. You don't get the car and park it right outside of Pirates of the Caribbean.
No, you're trying to get close. And
Yes.
I think that's the key, is that you may not be completely happy with every candidate out there, which nobody ever is, but you're trying to get as close as possible. Like
Yes.
who's going to get us closer to our destination? And I think that's what we have to keep in mind.
Yeah. And any campaign that's a them or us is not necessarily a good campaign. It's all us. Come on.
Yeah.
So, ugh.
Yeah.
Anyway.
And also, while we're talking about voting, and I mentioned this on the podcast as well, but be sure to vote in your local elections.
Yes.
Because the state elections, they ultimately affect you a lot more directly than the federal ones do.
Very true.
And I mean, it all affects you, but don't dismiss your local and your state elections. Because I hear a lot of people who only get out and vote during the federal elections, but there's a lot that can be done on the local level as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's, so one of the last things we want to talk about real quick is, as you've heard, we're now affiliated with altplayground.net. They just launched their community modules, their community boards. We are on one of their community boards. Well, we are on our community boards on their website.
We have a community board.
We have a community board. I don't know. I don't English well. And you can connect to us there. So you can find all of our shows and some of our show notes. And we'll try to post on there. I can't promise to try, but I can promise to try.
Right. Yes. We're just starting up our community module. So we're getting it going. We're going to try to be good about getting up there, posting on it, checking it, etc. May put up a few pictures here and there.
But it is another way that you can connect to us and ask us questions. And
Yes.
that we do pretty well with.
Yeah.
So that just adds another way for you to get in contact with us. And that's on altplayground.net.
Yeah. So go check us out.
Go check us out. So, shall we wrap this mother up? Do you have anything else you want to say? This was a heavy podcast. I'm sorry. We normally laughs and giggles and jokes and shit, but sometimes we got to get down to the real stuff and talk about things that are very important. And I think this was very important.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, pride can be serious as well. It can't all be fun and games.
I mean, it can be colorful and fun and games and whatnot, but it's also a very serious matter.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So if you want to reach out to us and ask us questions about this podcast, feel free, do it. You can email us. We are theatomsoflove@gmail.com, or on all of our socials, which are Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. We are at By the By Podcast, and we always love to hear from you. Yeah. Anything else you want to add?
And if you would like access to our videos and bylogs, which we've got a few up now on our website, you can get the password by becoming a Patreon supporter at www.patreon.com/bythebypodcast.
I completely forgot that one.
I know.
It's bad. I've had like a couple of drinks and I'm like, ugh. I'm just so tired. Yeah. So definitely check us out there. Please support us. And that's how you also get your hands on some of our cum rags. So, yeah.
And for Patreon supporters in the U.S. and Canada at the moment, I am very sorry, but there is a big delay on getting those to you because we did get one shipment out a little while ago, but from what I'm being told by the post office, it's taking a good month or two to get shipments to the U.S. because there are hardly any planes going back and forth. And at the moment, I'm not able to ship anything because they are only sending letters. So I keep trying every week, and as soon as we can get more out, I certainly will.
Well, we told them we wrote a letter on the towel. It says, "Dear cum rag."
Yes, so they will be going as soon as we possibly can, send anything overseas again.
Yes.
So,
Ugh.
so patience, people, it's coming.
Damn you, COVID-19.
Yeah.
Look, people, stay inside. Don't start the spread, and then you'll get your cum rags.
Exactly. Yes, the faster we can get this cleared up, the faster you get your cum rags.
And you can turn them into. We should do face masks. We should do by the by face masks. God, that's
great.
Oof. Okay. So yes, thank you very much, and we'll see you next week.